All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third episode of the AI webinar series, Gaming with Consciousness. I'm Dr. Adriana de Souza e Silva, and I'm the director of the Center for Transformative Media. The Center for Transformative Media is CAM's interdisciplinary research hub dedicated to investigating the transformative potential of emerging media technologies in shaping grassroots creativity and promoting social change. We explored the many ways in which media technologies interact with societies. For example, how emerging media technologies transform society, our creative potential to develop new technologies, but also how creative uses of technologies improve people's lives. And in particularly, we are focusing on this idea of AI as media, that is a cultural and communicative force that shapes creativity, knowledge production, and civic life, and how it transforms urban spaces, storytelling, journalism, community engagement, and society. Here are just some of ways that you can be involved with the center. You can check out our website, sign up for a newsletter and social media. If you're local, attend to our biweekly brown bag lunches and also organize an event and attend our events. They're all on our website, which you can access through the QR code on the screen. This is our lineup for March events. We have quite a few events coming up this week as part of Design Research Week and CAMD Day. And in April, we also have a book launch and then the last webinar series for this semester, which is about AI influencers. With that, I would like to invite Yifan Xu, who is our postdoctoral fellow in the Center for Transformative Media, who is going to be hosting the event today and introducing the speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Hi everyone, my name is Yifan. Welcome to Gaming to Conscience. And as Adriana mentioned, this is the third webinar we've had. So if you missed the first two webinars, check out our website and find the recordings. So today we have a mix of designers, scholars, and artists. We'll have a discussion around gaming, and hopefully at the very end of this, we'll have a few short presentations, and we'll have like lively discussion regarding how AI-driven systems are responding to human choices, and we'll talk about provide a space for us to kind of talk about the social and philosophical consequences of machine-mediated play. So here we have three panelists today. We have Carrie Wang, who is a socially engaged artist and educator whose work investigates the relationships between human and machine, technology and power, and language and alienation. We also have Casper Hartfeld. Casper is a professor and associate dean of game design at Northeastern University. He also runs Ghost Lab, where they leverage design, engineering, and computer science and social sciences to address societal challenges through creative technologies, such as games and virtual reality. And lastly, we have Celia Pierce. Celia is a game designer, artist, scholar, and curator whose work focuses on multiplayer games, virtual worlds, experimental game forms, and gender in games. So in terms of the structure, the session runs about 60 to 90 minutes, and we'll try to get it down to like 60 minutes because Celia needs to leave early. We'll have a few short individual presentations from our panelists. Each will vary from 5 to 7 minutes. And then I will be moderating an informal dialogue between the panelists, which will last for about 20 minutes. And lastly, we have audience Q&A for about 20 minutes. So feel free to take notes, and then at the very end, we'll have time for the audience to ask questions. And before we start the panel, I just want to give a shout out to Suda Nuka, who is the mastermind behind everything at this webinar. And the first year PhD student, she's doing so much, juggling between coursework and a million other things. So I love you guys to give a round of applause, a silent applause to Susan Noka for setting this up, for having everyone here. All right, thank you. All right, Carrie, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I'll share screen.
Go for it.
Right, you should be seeing my slideshow and my introduction.
Yes.
Hello.
Good to go.
Yes. My name is Carrie Sijia Wang. Thanks for having me. And Sutanuka, thanks for inviting me. I am a socially engaged artist working with technology. I'm also an adjunct at New York University. I'm mostly teaching in the undergraduate department of interactive media arts. And I will introduce 3 of my works, and I kind of separate them into pre-AI and post-AI. By AI, I mean the boom of generative AI in late 2022. So before generative AI was kind of pushed into everyday use, I focused mostly on creating playable game-like interactive fictions. And in these experiences, I often include an AI character. And this character sometimes serves as a metaphor for the authority figure in that scenario, like an HR person or an immigration officer. But also it's a direct comment on how technology has been used in different sectors to reinforce existing power dynamics. So for example, in this 2020 work, I started this project in 2019, actually spent about a year developing it. It's called An Interview with Alex. The player or the user goes through this fictional job interview with an artificial intelligence HR manager called Alex. And you will be asked to say you're ready, to smile into the camera, and to play these mini games. And you will soon feel a little dehumanized, especially when the HR character starts to pressure you and demands you to be open about answering these really private questions, such as this one. So that's an interview with Alex. This is me failing the interview. And another example from 2023, I actually started this project in 2022 and finally completed it in 2023. It's called Hey Alien. It's another interactive fiction. And this time the visitor is put in the role of an alien going through a series of immigration tests so that they can immigrate to this fictional planet after Earth has become uninhabitable. They will answer questions like, where are you from? What's your name? Why are you here? What makes you qualified to stay? So it's really trying to, through a fictional lens, convey the feelings of alienation and the elusive rules of assimilation in the immigrant experience. And this is another screenshot from the same project. And since these projects, we all know that the technological landscape has shifted a lot. And what I meant as near future cautionary tales in the workplace and in immigration is now feeling like reality. My students are telling me that many companies are interviewing them with AI, using AI systems. And sometimes they may not speak to a real person until the very final round. So that's in the workplace and in the immigration system as well, because I went through the whole process myself. I follow many law firm accounts, and they're now advertising services to help you write materials that AI can understand because the government is starting to push AI into the reviews of applicants' materials. So it definitely feels like we're moving into this era where we increasingly have to perform for AI systems in order to please the algorithms. So I wanted to do something. I've decided I personally am very conflicted about using AI. but I cannot escape from it either. So I decided to turn to other people. My work is now more about connecting with different communities and co-creating this understanding of technology's impact on society. And for the past few years, I've been working with teenagers in New York across different neighborhoods in workshops and activities to archive their perspectives on technology and society and to build critical AI literacy. And this project is one of the results from that workshop series. I asked the students to write down hypothetical dialogues between a human and an imagined AI. And then I gave them this interactive chatbot template for them to perform these staged conversations as a way to express their own perspectives. And these are some of the screenshots from the performative chatbot conversations. One of the students compared AI to Frankenstein, saying that it's a product of humans' innate desire to progress and represents the danger of knowledge. And there are also very funny ones, like the one on the left. And later I made it into a video installation. These are just some of the photos. And it's also being shown as a virtual installation called in an exhibition called Techno Mirage, scattered in the mountain areas. So yeah, that's it. That's my work. Thank you. Stop sharing.
Very lovely. Thank you so much, Carrie. I
Thank
think your work really speaks to some of the realities that are going on. I definitely remember one time I was playing a game at the very last stage of my interview with the consulting company. So that kind of that speaks to home. All right. So next we have Casper, Casper Hatfield. All right, the stage is yours.
Yeah, and I had no idea, but this afternoon I'm actually playtesting a game where in that game you're role-playing a conversation between a human and an AI. So it was really interesting to see that, Carrie, that you've done some of this work already. So I already messaged my PhD student to look at your work. That's super fascinating. All right. So yeah, a couple of things on my end. That I think is fascinating. So I just came from the Game Developers Conference, and AI was obviously a big talking point. And what I thought was interesting that throughout the conversations there, and obviously this was the industry perspective, so I'm just sharing this with everyone here, which is that a lot was said that AI was mostly helpful to relieve production constraints because with games it's huge productions, it's really challenging, and there's a lot of constraints in terms of time, and that AI relieves the companies such that they can focus on what's really important, which is to make games fun. And so so that was an interesting observation, that they were positioning AI as such. Now, of course, there are all kind of consequences and other aspects to consider here, but this was sort of how the industry was presenting it. And the other aspect, how they were presenting it, is that they were more seeing it as a prototyping tool. So for early iteration, because especially with games, if you want to make a game really fun, it requires a lot of iteration and trying and testing out. And with AI, it can happen a lot faster. And there was actually one talk that really struck me, which was a game created by students, and it's now an indie company, and maybe you want to try it out. It's called 1001 Nights. It's a game where you're interacting with a large language model. It's like embedded in the game. And one of the issues that they were talking about, which was that there's artists, designers, and programmers. And the complaint that the director had, who the producer was, that the programmers never have time. They always say, "Do you want to do this?" "No, we don't have time." And so what the artists and designers now did was they were going to AI, to Gemini particularly, to prototype and test out different versions of the game that they wanted to see, that they envisioned, and that they wanted to realize before then going to the developers. So they were basically documenting different demos that they created with AI to then talk to the developers who would then actually implement it fully. So it was a really interesting, different way in how AI is included in the practice. And in this way, it's sort of like an interesting, sort of almost like boundary object between artists and designers and programmers to really talk and converse with each other around what the product needs to look like. So that was really interesting. And one of my favorite games I saw there was by Meshi AI, and I'll drop some pictures in the chat, which was a game where where basically you can talk to the AI to say what kind of weapons you want, and then it gets generated on the fly. It becomes very messy. You know, for instance, you know, you can walk around, like one of the things you can say, wherever I walk, black holes appear, and then it appears in the screen. There's a big question about the playability of this, and that's sort of like what the company was talking about, you know, these tensions that arise, because if AI becomes available, the expressiveness of the games becomes greater, but does the playability also increase? And there was one talk by Frank Lantz from NYU who set up a game studio to focus on AI-driven gameplay. And he argued that so far we haven't really seen a successful game where AI is really integrated into the gameplay. So his provocation was, we don't see it. We don't see these games where AI is really integrated into the core loop of the game. You know, not like procedural content generation where the AI is generated on the fly, but where you're meaningfully interacting with the AI. And he's trying to do it. And he said he's been working on it for the past couple of years and he has failed at it. So it's really challenging to think about how you could meaningfully integrate AI into games. So I thought that was interesting. And that relates to some of my work. One of my earlier papers from a few years ago was actually to look at player AI interaction and thinking about, you know, if AI is part of the core game experience, not, you know, generating aspects, you know, what examples exist and what do we see? So we do see some interesting examples, but they're all experimental games and they don't necessarily work very well. But so we are still like really at the beginning of really thinking about how AI could actually be meaningfully integrated into games. A particular project that I'm working on, which also has like ethical aspects surrounding it to think about in multiple layers, is I'm working on an escape room project. And that project started because I wanted to do something with escape rooms, but you need to have funding, and AI was a thing. So I was thinking, you know, I could incorporate AI into this escape room and to help people to become better at problem solving. And so what we're doing, because in escape rooms, you actually have a natural relationship because this is about integrating AI meaningfully into a game. And I thought escape rooms actually lent themselves really easily for that because you actually have, you know, a meaningful interaction with like a game facilitator or an escape room master who's guiding you through the escape room. And so that could be basically an AI. Now, one of the ethical tensions here is already, you know, is AI then replacing, you know, escape room masters, which, you know, we did hear and hear about. But in the context of the work that we're doing, we're really trying to see how AI could actually augment and help people in their problem solving capabilities. And the other thing is too, is that this AI can actually help escape room masters to do a much better job because there's a lot of signals that indicate that a person doesn't want to have a hint or they're close to actually solving the puzzle. And if an escape room master intervenes at that point, it's actually a problem. So in that way, you know, the AI is not necessarily replacing, but it could actually help escape room masters to provide a better experience. But the issues, what we're exploring here is to provide the AI a lot of knowledge. We provide the AI knowledge with what the player is doing in the surroundings, so looking at the behavior, but also at the emotions of the players, their eye tracking. So there's a lot of information that the AI knows. And then it also becomes a little scary that if you're in an escape room and that you're engaged in an activity where the AI actually knows a lot about you and responds exactly at the moments. So there's like this tension here where we want people to excel and become better, but in order to become better and excel, we need to provide information to an AI. And so to what extent, you know, how do we negotiate these kind of tensions with regards to data, performance, et cetera, et cetera. So that is where I'll leave it at.
Thank you, Casper. I love that how your work is tied to this like constant human AI, human machine reconfiguration to really, figure out how we can uh, just work with AI in ways that are beneficial for humans and that are also meaningful, right? I love your work. I love that your work is also tied to the changing of process of work, like the designer, artist kind of, and software sort of like division of labor. That was emerging. All right. Lastly, we have Celia. Celia, are you ready?
I sure am. Okay,
Yeah, take it.
I'm gonna just talk about two things, and I came here prepared for more of a conversation really than a presentation. But the first part I want to talk about is, I mean, I've been working in the game industry since 1983, so I've been through every possible conflagration of technology. And I wanted to just take a moment to talk about the ways in which the game industry and game scholars and game researchers have already been using AI for 30 years. We sort of keep acting like it was just invented yesterday, but in actual fact, people have been using AI in games since the 1980s, honestly. And um, and we've used it for different things. We've used it for people talked about generative games where the game levels are actually being built in real time in response to the player. There's been some really interesting work done with AI narrative going back 30 or more years. The Blade Runner game, if anyone's played that from the 90s, has an AI-driven narrative that is designed to change the story depending on whether it thinks you are a replicant or not. Um, and we also have AI characters that we've had in games for years. We've had A Life, which is, virtual life forms in games. Blanking out on the Maxis game that Spore, which is essentially an A-Life simulator, and also simulated players to do playtests. In fact, we used to have a faculty member here, Christopher Holmgard, who that's exactly what he did with AI. Was he created sort of like Casper was talking about a simulated players to playtest games before they brought in actual players. And then there's also been a lot of academic work such as Stacy Masala, who's over here in the Curry College. I worked with him in the 90s on training simulators with AI characters, and his specialty was, and I think still is, simulating emotions in AI characters, which is actually very hard to do. So, but what I want to talk about from my perspective of my sort of knowledge base has to do with multiplayer games. And I think that we need to think a little bit more thoughtfully, for lack of a better word, about um, the social dynamics in these online games. We've been hearing a lot about Roblox and various kinds of abuses that have been happening there, and griefing and predators and things like that. Um, and I think that we need to think about these online communities in a really different way. For one thing, many online games, the more popular online games are the size of countries. Like if there are 5 million people in a game, that makes that game the size of a country. And so we need to think about them not just as games or even as communities, but as whole societies that are coming up emergently through these online spaces. And the thing that really has troubled me for many years and continues to trouble me is that these spaces are largely unsupervised. So what tends to happen is that when you sign up for an online game, you have to sign a terms of service statement, which is usually about 20 pages long, which nobody reads. And then there's zero enforcement. So you agree to do all these things, but at the same time, if you don't do those things, there's nobody there to monitor you. So if you can imagine going into a country that has 5 million people in it, or 10 million people in it, that has a long, elaborate list of laws, but no police force, you can easily imagine what's going to happen, right? So I would really like to see people thinking a little bit more about AI as assisting in that process. Moderation of online spaces is really challenging. It takes a lot of manpower, but it also is very emotionally taxing because there's a lot of griefing, there's a lot of abuse that goes on, and people who are responsible for vetting that and for monitoring it report a lot of trauma as a result. So but many of the patterns we see are very consistent. And the one I like to talk about, which is kind of a little bit off color, but I think is really important, is this thing that people in the industry call the TTP. This stands for time to penis. And it really just says, how long is it going to take people to make a penis with your online creation tools, right? And to me, it's a metaphor, but what we know is that that particular thing will always happen no matter what, whenever you make content creation tools. In every environment we know, irrespective of what the affordances of the software are, that will always happen. On the flip side, another emergent behavior that I've found in my research was that no matter what the world is, whether it's text-based or visual or 3D or virtual reality, people will always find a way to get married. Every game I've ever studied, this has been the case. So we can easily predict certain types of behavior. We know they're consistent. We know that some of them are independent of the affordances of the software. We can also study how software affordances influence these emergent behaviors. So if we can do that, then why can't we create a responsive AI system that can also recognize when asocial behavior or antisocial behavior is happening and work again in tandem with humans? We need humans to understand the meaning of things in order to make these places safer and more pleasant for people to be in. And also, we know a lot of abuse happens, particularly happens from male players. That's a really common known thing. A thing that nobody is talking about right now. Everyone is worried about predators in Roblox. The vast majority of harassment in Roblox is done by 10-year-old boys towards other children and adults. So we don't really look at how young people, how children also pose hazards to each other and to other people. We're always worried about protecting them, but we need to understand also that people need to be protected from them at the same time. Those are the main things I wanted to say. Yeah, I think that's all I have for now. So I would like to open it up for a conversation.
Thank you, Celia. I love like different threads started popping up in your guys' conversations. I love some of those threads. I think all of you kind of, at least there's one thread I love the most is from Carrie's work on those artist installations and how we're gamifying structures, we're gamifying recruitment, gamifying immigration structures, but I think that really speaks to like who we are or what we are as humans. Speaks to human agency. And I love Casper's work on. I think you mentioned that AI-driven game designs has not been in the core not being super successful, right? So that means that we still need humans in the loop. We still need humans to do a lot of the essential work. And Celia too, people always find a way to get married, and that we need humans to assist to do the core work with AI assisting us. So I think the first question I have for all of you is where is the human agency in this like human machine interaction? Like where does the human agency come in play?
I mean, I feel like, especially in the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing these stories about AI in the Pentagon, and I think that my personal experience working with AI on projects has shown that that AI is really bad at certain things. Like it doesn't understand meaning, so it can see what's on the screen, but it can't really determine what that means. It doesn't have the cultural context for that. And it also has a really rough time with gestalt. Like, for instance, the classic one that I think is still a persistent problem is AI consistently making humans with 6 fingers or 3 toes. I had AI once make some swing dancers, and one of the 2 dancers had 3 legs. Any child, a 3-year-old child, 4-year-old child could recognize that a person had 3 legs, but for some reason AI cannot. So I think that understanding what its limitations are and what it is incapable of and what humans are uniquely capable of that AI is not is really important, because if we give AI too much if we put too much faith in its ability to understand meaning, that's where we often will bump into problems. I mean, I was talking to someone about this the other day too, which was CAPTCHA, right? The CAPTCHA AI proof thing. Think about this for a minute. It asks you a question. It says, which image has a motorcycle in it? And it thinks that AI can't recognize that. So that tells you how profoundly dumb AI is, even to people that are creating security protocols for it, right? Is that it can't tell what's a motorcycle in a photograph. So that we have to understand what that means. I mean, I personally prefer actual intelligence over artificial intelligence any day.
Casper, Carrie,
Yeah.
want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to say, yeah, I agree with Celia. I think we need to understand the limitations of AI to see it as what it is. It's called artificial intelligence, but that's a marketing term. It's machine learning, it's prediction models, it's algorithms that make predictions based on patterns it has gathered in human behavior. I think to be able to see it for what it is the first step. And then we can talk about how we want to use them. So I think it's very important for creatives, especially younger people, as young people are stepping into the field with AI already being here. To build critical AI literacy, to understand the history, like Celia was talking about, it's like ever since the 50s, 60s, people have been talking about artificial intelligence and making chatbots and whatnot. To understand the context, where they came from, the current landscape of language models, for instance, how does the model work? Instead of just knowing how to use it, we got to understand how it works. What is tokenization? Like, how do they predict outcomes? Who develops them? Who funds them? Where are they being used right now? So I think that's a very critical step in, I guess, because I also teach. So I think about education a lot, how to prepare people for the industry where AI is already being used. So I think we need to see them for what they are and then think about how to use them to make mindful decisions.
Yeah, I offer a couple of different perspectives here. So one is, and that I've been surprised about myself. I've seen and read tons of different papers where, where people are creating educational games, which is part of the work that I'm doing, and they plug in a large language model that you interact with. And by and large, the work that has shown so far shows that players who are playing with an educational game that has the condition with a large language model find that experience to be more engaging and also seem to learn a little bit more, you know, from what I've seen. And I'm a little struck by that because, like they just insert the large language model into it, like they don't really do anything special with it. And, I wonder, part of me is wondering whether this is like a short-term effect that we're seeing as people get more accustomed, because people are like, oh, I can actually talk to a large language model and I can, ask questions. So for instance, if you're in an educational game and you have further questions with regards to, the educational background or the topic that it's about, you can actually ask questions and you get feedback. A lot of my educational games is basically everything is determined upfront. And if there's a question, so for instance, I sometimes ask reflective prompts to basically stimulate people to think about what they're doing, but it's just basically a prompt and there's no response. And now with a large language model, you can actually have a conversation. And it does seem, in terms of the question about agency, that in terms of the gameplay itself, it does foster this idea of, oh, I can actually interact with this entity that may know something about the topic that I'm, engaging with. But there's all these kind of questions for me with regards to, what's the long term, is there a short term effect here where we're seeing that people are actually more engaged by it? Because before you know it, we have, we're already seeing that large language models are everywhere. And so maybe that effect disappears, but also what does that mean for our education and for, what people are learning if you just leave it completely open and plug in these models into our games. The other perspective I have, and I kind of alluded to that during my presentation, which is just thinking about the process. So how is AI included in the game design process, or in how we play games, in terms of what that means for agency? So I think, what I'm seeing, what I described about the artists and designers, I feel like they're more empowered now to be able to convey what they're interested in. So there are also benefits to it, but yeah, the question is, to what extent does that go? There are also side effects. I was talking to my PhD student about some of the things that I saw at the Game Developers Conference, and she immediately said, "Look, it also generates a lot more data that also needs to be inspected and verified." Meshi AI, the talk I went to, which is basically an AI that helps generate art assets, they said in human history, I mean, these are their data, I didn't verify it, by hand, by humans, 150 million 3D art assets were generated. Now with Meshi AI, they generated those amounts like in the last 3 years. So, but what does it mean that we're generating so many more 3D art assets? Like, that's a lot more data to look at. There's maybe a lot of junk out there that also need to be all stored. So I think there's a lot of these kind of questions about process and what that all means.
Yeah, I love this focus on process to really looking into how
Mhm.
AI is included, excluded, maybe delegated, augmented in the process of doing the work that's traditionally done by humans only. So love the segue. I have this.
I'm sorry, can I loop back around and kind of get into a dialogue with these two? Because there's a couple things they said that I think are really important to pinpoint. Um, one is you just touched on that actually, Ifan, which is this idea of labor. And I think one of the things that concerns me is that there is a sort of capitalistic ideology around the idea that we can replace people with AI. And this is exactly what's happening in HR. What you guys were describing is let's just fire the HR people and get computers to do the work. So I think that there's some concern, although Casper's talking about how the AI can help, which is the very kind of Engelbartian idea, right, of AI, which is AI augments human intelligence. And that's great. But then there's the flip side, which is we're capitalists and we don't want to spend money on labor. And so we're going to fire everybody and replace them with AI, including the programmers who program the AI, which is what's actually happening now. So there's a kind of ethical problem with the labor practices of thinking about replacing people with AI. There's also this issue that Carrie touched on, which I think is super important, to do with AI literacy. And I've been going through this little funny microcosm of this where my sister and my parents and I have been sending, like, they send little memes to each other. And many of the memes that they've been sending have been AI generated. And I've been playing kind of a little game and teaching them, like, oh, this picture of these ice people chasing a guy in a bathtub, if you look closely, you'll see that all the police are running exactly the same way. So that must be AI generated. Like, how can we, it's easy to tell when there's too many fingers, but how can we learn to be a little more discriminating as humans and be able to see when something is artificially generated? And then the third thing I wanted to touch on was psychology. So I think it was I don't remember. Maybe Carrie said this. Oh no, you actually said it, Ifan. There was this very famous AI that was made in, I think, the 60s, called Eliza. That was a psychologist, right? And what was the most interesting about that was not the AI, but how people reacted to it, because it was using the sort of protocol of psychiatry, which is asking a lot of questions that are prompted by what the person says. So it's a very simple thing to mimic with AI. But people would actually have a therapeutic experience, even though in some cases they knew it wasn't real. So there is another side that we really haven't touched on. I think Casper maybe has worked with this a little bit, which is like, what are the psychological implications of AI? How do they affect us cognitively, intellectually, emotionally, etc.? So those would be my three kind of provocations to talk about a little more, perhaps.
Sorry, I think my internet dropped for a second. I missed the second. thread?
Yeah, so the first one was labor, the second was
Mm,
AI literacy, and the third one
mhm,
was the emotional impact of AI on us.
mhm.
How does
Lovely.
AI affect
Mhm.
us?
Yeah, lovely. I love all those threads. Let's start with the labor practices. That actually ties to my some of my research I've done in the past. But yeah, who wants to yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, Carrie, go for it.
Yeah, I love these threads. Thank you, Celia. Um, yeah, definitely. I definitely agree that we now often talk about human versus AI, and I think that's super misleading. It's putting us in the same position as artificial intelligence, but we're humans. It almost seems like, hey, somebody's like, or some systems are trying to pit us against each other to have us fight to prove that we're the better workers. So that's super misleading for sure. The thing that people should be talking about, companies should be talking about, is how they can maybe integrate AI from a more responsible perspective to help their workers, to help their workers, like Casper was talking about, help them augment their work instead of replacing them. And that is difficult, but that's something that people should be talking about and thinking about. Instead of putting productivity first, companies should put humans first. That's easily said than done, for sure. Um, and in terms of the psychological effect, definitely. Oh, or should we stay with labor? Sorry, I'll stop there.
No, go. That was great. I'm just gonna add another dimension onto the labor practices, which is the rhetorics, the discourse that's going on in the broader realm of AI or AI industry. That the broader discourse and rhetoric seems to be like AI is replacing humans, and we're able to do so with technology. But is that a reality, or is that just the rhetoric, right? So, and in terms of augmentation, there are two threads, like augmentation or versus replacement. Um, I think there are more than just two of them. But it probably requires us like constantly like thinking through this process. Again, going back to process Casper mentioned, the process of work. Where does it make more sense to put to have humans have more control? Where do we need to put AI or technology in place to assist the humans? So I think there's something we're there's something that's not just restricted to this dichotomy of replacement versus augmentation. So that's just another thing I
But
want to
I
add on
mean,
to the conversation.
yeah, it brings up another thing too that I was thinking about too, which is and the HR example is a perfect one for this, right? Is that recent research has found that AI-driven HR is propagating lack of equity and kind of just creating the same exact workforce we already have and not doing much to help with diversification because it's mimicking what already exists. So it's trying to hire people that look like the people that have already been hired, right? And so it's actually making things worse in a way because it's just trying to reinforce the power structures that exist rather than helping to create more equity and more diversity.
Absolutely. I think most of the technologies we have nowadays are, designed by us. So they're mostly reinforcing existing status quo rather than
And
challenging
when you say
that.
designed by us, I mean, there are three women, two women of color, one white man in this group. And most of the people designing this are more like Casper than the three of us. So nothing against Casper, but I'm just saying that those people that are doing those designs are then just having AI keep making more of themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to basically also labor practice, but add also another perspective on it because we are often talking about productivity, but one of the promises of AI is potentially for us to actually have more leisure because we are already overextended and working a lot. So if AI could help us so that we could potentially have more free time or dedicate us to our own growth and development, that'd be great. But currently we're seeing actually kind of the opposite, that the AI is actually pushing us to work even more and harder. We see it in academia, where now instead of some venues, instead of 2,000 papers, 3,000 papers are being submitted. So that stretches people already a lot thin with regards to reviewing. And I also see it sometimes in my practices. I mean, I love all my students and all the staff that I'm working with, that they're using AI to generate documents. So I ask somebody, can you do this for me? And within an hour, I get a document of 40 pages. And I'm like, am I going to read all these 40 pages? And what I've been hearing, is that some people then use AI to summarize what those people are generating. So now you got basically an AI creating a document by the staff or employee, and then the managers are basically using AI to summarize it. So it's insanity but that's obviously more general. But I think in the context of games, which we were talking about games specifically, I think the industry is under a lot of tension. Like there is certainly this labor replacement where especially entry level jobs are potentially being taken over by AI. Q&A testers, for instance. We have bots who could run through games and can get reports much more quickly. And a QA tester was basically the entry level job. And also entry level programming jobs are currently not necessarily as available. But that may be required us, also as institutions and universities to think, how do we educate people to go beyond basically those entry level jobs? Because now you basically need to code with AI. And a lot of companies, everybody I talk to, everybody is using AI to code, like all the programmers, developers. So, this is sort of like an expectation. But it's also true that the industry at large is under a lot of tension, especially, Celia, like for indie developers, they already have a hard time and limited resources to be able to do the work that they were doing. And so in a way, AI is also potentially empowering some of these folks to be able to do the kind of work that they want to do and to focus on creativity and expression in ways that wasn't possible before. So I'm not saying, in terms of the labor side, it's all doom and gloom. There's also the parts where things are being empowered and made possible. And so where do we draw the fine line? But I thought the presentation I saw by Meshi AI, at least that's how they presented it, was that this process and workflow, was being accelerated, but in every step there was still a human who was overseeing the process. And there were certain aspects of the 3D art generation that only a human was able to do. The AI could help with the lighting, which is just a tedious job, but the other specific aspects still required a human touch. So I found that at least somewhat reassuring, and of course this was a presentation to see.
Yeah, there's a rhetoric that going on within the AI industry, or I used to work in the robotics industry. So the rhetoric is kind of similar, that we have robots taking over people's jobs, then we get more leisure time, then we can relax, we can do all the fun things we get to do. But the reality is we are living in a capitalist society which seeks for constant productivity, constantly generating profit. So the reality is, the more robots, the more work, the more productivity. So it's not it's quite the opposite of what the rhetoric is. Yeah, Carrie, do you have anything to add onto the conversation on labor practices?
Yeah, I think all of these I resonate with a lot. And I've been talking about these with my students very often lately, because they're all very worried that they won't be able to find a job. Um, and what and I don't know how to solve this problem for them. All I could tell them is that you gotta understand, at the end of the day, it will be the creatives being responsible for the products. No matter how you can use AI to code faster or bypass some of the things that people are not so good at the end of the day, it will be you standing next to the work being responsible for the work that you have done, AI will not be able to take away that responsibility. And eventually we will still need humans. I know that companies are, some industries like, I don't know, investment banking, they're asking retirees to train AI models to replace young employees so that they can hire less interns, hire less junior staff. That sounds terrible and really scary, but I do think that this is, I hope and I think this is temporary, and there will be this phase where companies think that AI can do everything and can replace junior staff. But later they will realize that you will still need humans to be there to be responsible for things, to be in the loop every step of the way, and hopefully will correct its path in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my work really touched on the invisible labor in technology development. Like so much of the work is actually done by people, but they're portrayed as, hey, machines are doing everything, right? Which is just not the reality. So on labor replacement argument, there's a lot of research also showing that AI cannot do some of the work we consider as like low skills, easy to be replaced by machines are actually the hardest to be replaced. And there's also this financial part that going on within the industry is like you have the rhetoric going on that places people in an extremely disempowering position that, hey, we're going to have AI do this job. You can take $2 per hour. Do you want to get it or not? Right? It's just, it makes people feel like we don't have a lot of agency. We don't have much. There's not much we can do. But that's just not the reality. A lot of those tech companies use the rhetoric to fire people. Then later on, they have to rehire those people with lower wage. So there's money. There's a financial part as well.
I will say
I think
that sorry.
I'm frozen, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in here too to just say I think that this is a place where the arts has a unique role to play. Um, I know that the president had this book AI Proof, and I feel like in many ways art is more AI proof than other fields. And I've been working specifically in theater, which means that, I'm dealing with live performance. So you're sitting in a room with people in an interactive theater setting where literally like another human is talking to you, right? And those are the kinds of, for me anyway, those are the kinds of environments where like you can't AI your way out of that. Now you could theoretically use AI to augment and help manage, say, the narrative of a live theater event. But ultimately, you're having a one-on-one or a multiple person experience with real people in the flesh. And so I think that's a place where we can look to getting beyond this idea of sort of the substituting of labor and in thinking about the role arts have in getting us out of this mindset, right?
Okay, so we're getting close to the end. We still have 30 minutes of buffer, but we also have a few more threads we can talk about. AI literacy that's Carrie brought up, and also the psychological effects of AI that Casper has mentioned. Anyone wants to take a stab on any of these topics?
I mean, Jay Lynn dropped this article in here about basically how AI is making us dumb, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Um, that would be something I'd love to hear people's thoughts about.
Yeah, I think that's a huge topic now in education. Students are going to use AI anyway, and I'm curious about how you guys are dealing with that. Do you have protocols and whatnot? Yeah, I think what I'm trying to do is I know they will be using AI, so I reserve class time for us to use it together. So I teach creative coding. I do think it's still crucial for students to understand how code works and to understand computational thinking before using AI to generate everything. Because even if you can quickly get a result in like 3 minutes, if you don't understand how it works, it will easily roll into a huge snowball that you cannot control. And it will be very difficult for people to debug as well. So will I try to guide them in their usage of AI, such as asking follow-up questions to actually understand the code that AI is giving to them and to build some structural understanding of the program and whatnot. But yeah, so that's my first step that I've taken over here. So I'm curious about how you are doing that as well.
I have a completely orthogonal approach to this problem, which is that I give students assignments they want to do. So an example of one that just passed through my class is they have to compare two adaptations of the same media, an imaginary world in two adaptations, and talk about which one fails and which one succeeds. I can't get them to shut up about it. I actually have to give them a maximum word count or a maximum podcast, or they'll take more time than I've given them to do it. They really, really want to talk about the fandoms that they're interested in. And so by giving them those assignments, in my other class, which is an art class, they have to make artworks. And I have them do things like write a score a la Yoko Ono. And these are just things that you can't, first of all, they want to do them. And that's the number one thing to me is I give them assignments they want to do. If they want to clean them up with AI afterwards, fine. Most of them are not well enough written to have been done by AI, but they're very passionate and they're intellectually very robust. They may not have the best grammar, but they're thinking about what I want them to think about, and they're doing it because they want to. And that's to me the easiest way to avoid this is to just give people stuff to do that's so fun they don't want to farm it off to AI.
Yeah, for me, I have a different approach. It's a research project that we're working on around conversational AI. And so basically, we're creating a tailored conversational AI, which is called Study Helper for students who are learning about research methods, specifically statistics. So obviously, you could talk to ChatGPT or Claude and ask all kinds of statistical questions, but that's not how you necessarily would learn. You just get the answer, or you would be relying very much on it, in the way that Jalen's article is suggesting. And I also see, you could basically have the AI look at your data set and it calculates all the statistics for you. So there's questions about, okay, what does that mean? You still need to interpret it and understand it. So there's like this basic literacy that's needed. But what we're trying to do is to create a conversational AI that's a little bit gamified, that also engages in a dialogue. So it doesn't immediately give the answer, but games are, one of the things with games is that it's challenging. It doesn't really give you immediately the answer. I always give the example of an ATM machine versus a game. Like if you go to an ATM machine, you get the money right away. But if an ATM machine would be gamified, it would tell you, you have to do a little bit of work to get your money. And so that's what we're trying to do now as well. We're really basically pushing people as they're engaging with the conversational AI to really deeply understand and have a conversation with the AI in an engaging way. And it seems to be somewhat working. And of course, it's very tailored to that class. It doesn't necessarily stop people, of course, from going at home and using another AI, but at least thinking about how can we use the same technology, but in a way that people actually learn from it, is what we're investigating and trying out.
Oh, it seems like every time I try to talk, my internet drops. So hopefully this time it doesn't. I have a question. I want to circle back to Casper, actually. You mentioned that you feel like AI is almost like serving as this boundary object for like artists, designers. In like it's kind of slowly changes the process of work. Like, do you see any creative uses of using AI as a boundary object that's, I guess that's generative, that's has beneficial sort of outcomes for these different roles of humans? No, this.
Yeah, I mean the first thing is the example I gave where basically these artists and designers were creating documents where they had demos embedded. So the document actually demos embedded in them where they were playing around with Gemini and included it. So it's sort of a different practice emerged in where they were expressing their creativity and what they want to have accomplished. So the AI allowed the artists and designers to realize their vision and communicate that to others. So that's what I found very fascinating.
Mhm.
You know, I'm trying to think about other examples to your question. You know, how that would enable people to do, but for sure it enables people to potentially engage with certain aspects that they didn't know before. So, for instance, I also have a student who in previous years needed to rely on somebody else to create something, and now he can directly, with his own creativity, is able to basically create what he wants to do. So that means that he's a little bit more in control in a way, even though I was working with an AI about what is being created, as opposed to delegating it to another person. So the question is, yeah, is that maybe a good thing that we empower certain people to be able to uh, be able to create and their vision, their artistic vision or the designly vision on their own, together with the help of an AI. So those are the things that I'm seeing, and to what extent, it really, there's this whole field called co-creativity. There's actually a conference, international, it's ICCC, so International Conference on Computational Creativity, where a lot of work is being done around co-creativity and to what extent that's emerging. It's like in all kind of different disciplines. So people are investigating that, but I don't have any other examples, so I'll just see if
But
Carrie
I I
has it.
love that, Casper, and I want to add something to that, which is that you can you can tell when artwork has been created by AI, right? AI, right? But there are people who actually know how to use it really well. And
Mhm.
so, I think about it as, it's another tool, like a paintbrush. If
Mhm.
you know how to use a paintbrush well, you can paint well with it, right? So it's the same kind of thing. And part of what I think stands out with people who have those skills, someone like who's one of our PhD students, who's taught herself how to use AI in a much more creative way to augment her own skill set, is doing much more interesting work. Or somebody like Natrice Gaskins, my former PhD student at Georgia Tech, who makes beautiful artwork with AI, but it looks like hers. It's not generic regurgitated art. She's figured out a way to work with the AI to make it do what she wants, to express what she wants, like Casper's student.
All right. So far, I think we have one. Do we only have one audience question right now? We can knock that question out and continue with our discussions. Okay. All right. So there's one question is it from Sutanuka? um, okay, but could AI generated content then reduce the role of human creativity in game and design? Why or why not? And how long will we need humans in the loop? So my first gut reaction is we will always need humans to do the patchwork. But I'll let the panelists answer the question. Let me bump it up.
I would like to think that humans will not be kicked out. There's intrinsic value in human-made things because it's humans consuming those things, right? And art is beautiful, games are fun, design is great because there is a creative or a team of creatives behind them trying to express themselves or trying to reach out to the world through the creation and the hope to connect with other people. So I think like if getting rid of that completely, I don't think is ever going to happen. But it's definitely going to change the work, the methods, the tools, the approaches, the industries. And it's a matter of like we were talking similar to what we were talking about in terms of labor. It's a matter of thinking about how to mitigate the impact and to
Mhm.
empower designers and artists instead of making their work more intense or devaluing their work.
Yeah, I think the definition of creativity might start to shift a little bit too, because creativity is such a subjective definition, subjective concept from us humans.
Yeah, just one thought that occurred to me as we're discussing this. So obviously there's the industry where basically there's a lot of creativity happening, a lot of great games are being developed, a lot of times by single human beings who may benefit from some help, so that they don't have to take 5 years to develop a single game, or but then on the AAA side, what we're seeing is actually a lack of creativity. A lot of the industry is sort of like dug into, oh, we developed a success formula. It's too costly to be able to, try out and experiment. So part of me maybe hopes to see that, maybe this actually unleashes some of these companies to take more risks, because it isn't potentially as costly any longer to try out different ways. But maybe I'm too optimistic around that. But I think in terms of creativity, maybe it allows for a little bit more creativity. Of course, there's the flip side of the coin, which is that if we're too reliant on the AI to generate certain things, then obviously that would be problematic. But as long as humans are in the loop and that they are able to explore and refine, I think that's where I hope things to go. But I certainly would welcome a little bit more diversity in different kind of games, as opposed to Call of Duty. What number is now? 7, 8? I lost track.
I mean, I want to kind of touch on something you said, Casper. First of all, I think that any kind of faith in the mainstream game industry to innovate is misplaced. But also, I think there's a flip side of this, which we can trace back to things that have happened in the past. When Unity came out, it meant that nobody had to code their physics from scratch anymore. And so that meant indie developers could spend all their time making game mechanics and not worrying about the underlying game engine properties, which hadn't existed before. And, I've been around long enough to know that we all did our own game engines for 20 years before that platform came out. So to me, a positive outcome could be that indie developers actually have more affordances for creative expression, because in a similar way that a game engine takes some of the labor off of them, other aspects of AI may help them be more productive and be less precarious. But I also think I think it's important for us to remember that people like to make art. I mean, we're in the Department of Art and Design here, and many, many students come to our department who are not majors because it's fun. It's fun to make art. It's fun to be in theater. It's fun to draw pictures. It's fun to take photographs. And so there is always going to be an inclination among people to be creative because it feels good. And so I think that part of it, I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about people not being creative. I'm a little bit worried about I'm more worried about the propagation of power structures and things like that AI is kind of regurgitating the bad stereotypes, because there is this emphasis, I think Carrie was talking about, on prediction, right? Prediction is a very, very rough-hewn, clunky, ham-fisted tool, and every time we've tried to do anything with it, we have tended to screw up, like this whole business with the AI, with the Anthropic AI that every Pentagon scenario ends in a nuclear holocaust. Like, clearly machines are not good at making those kinds of decisions. And so that's the part that worries me, is the sort of abdicating responsibility and allowing the machines to make the decisions for us.
Right, especially in high-stake environments. Okay, we have a great question from the audience. So the problem of working with AI seems to be also the problem of giving dignity to different forms of intelligences and learning how to co-produce with them. In that context, considering how powerful games can be in storytelling and world building, what role does or should game design play in shaping the evolution of AI? What a great question. How do we create a joint reality with technologies through our entanglement? Who wants to take a stab on this one?
I have to go teach students how to do that right now. But again, I will say this, making games is fun. Creating games is an interesting, fun thing that people want to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a very successful game program here. So I think we can rely on that aspect of human nature, the desire to be creative, the desire to make beautiful things, the type of work that Carrie is doing, which feels compelled to do. There are people who are compelled to make beautiful things. And so to me, I've got a bunch of kids across the quad here trying to make some XR stuff. And, I can totally rely. I don't have to be there in the room with them. I know they're making creative things and they want to do it and it's fun for them. So to me, that's the thing that gives me hope is I know people are going to continue to want to make things and be creative. So with that, I'm going to check out and go teach my kids how to make XR. See you later.
Good to see you,
Bye.
Celia. Bye.
Yeah, I can respond to that question. So I dropped in a link to an article about the player AI interaction, which was from quite a bit of time ago, 2021. But in that article, we're also arguing that games. So actually, and Celia pointed to this as well. The relationship with games and AI is very, very old. Like from the beginning, games have been used as a test bed to basically explore the development of AI. And chess is, obviously the most obvious example where, we've been trying to see how intelligent AI is to see if an AI could actually beat a human. But that isn't necessarily contained to that. And in this article, we are also arguing how games can continue to be used test beds, but now focusing on human AI interaction, which we call player AI interaction. I think there's all kind of different ways in which we now need to think about it, because I think for the longest time, and we're still obviously improving AI and technical developments are happening, but I think we're at a moment where we're more considering about how AI is interacting with humans. And so, in terms of like direct interaction, but also in terms of the processes, like how does AI integrate into our workflows, et cetera, et cetera. So these questions have become a lot more pertinent now since AI is so accessible and, is something that is transforming the way we live, work, play, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think games can be a place where we can freely experiment with the ways in which we can interact with AI and perhaps learn some lessons before we really apply it in the real world. So I think game design is actually continues to be sort of like a driver in terms of, AI development, but not only in terms of technical development, but also in terms of like how do we interact. And these kind of also, goes back to some of the questions we had before around the psychology. We could see how people respond and react to an AI. I actually developed also, but never published around this, a game where basically you're making all kind of financial decisions, and then there's an AI in the background that basically is monitoring what you're doing, and then at some point takes over your job. This is basically the idea of, and the thing here was actually that somebody would go on leave, because of parental leave or something else, and or you're sick, and that the AI could take over your work for a temporary point of time. So we were actually exploring this in the context of a game to see how people respond to that or how they feel about that. So there's all kind of ways that you can experiment it within the game context. So that's the way I interpret the question.
Yeah, thank you. Carrie?
I don't know how relatable this will be to the question, but it makes me think of, because you mentioned different forms of intelligence, right? So I was thinking about, we now call it artificial intelligence, and these prediction models are simulating human behavior. Is there a way to evolve AI or create another form of AI that simulates, say, plant intelligence, or I don't know, another or animal intelligence for us to be able to interact with other kinds of systems using digital technologies for us to learn more about those systems? That's something that I've been thinking about, because it's these few big companies developing these AI models, we tend to think that there's only one way of developing AI models, and there is only one kind of data set that we can use. but there are also actually a lot more possibilities with the technology that I think we actually will be able to explore in the future as the technology evolves and as it becomes more accessible to
Yeah,
different people.
yeah, I think you touched on a very important fundamental question as is this the trajectory that we're all doomed? I don't think so, right? There's so many other alternatives. There
I
are
hope not.
possibilities. There are possibilities, there are alternative futures. And as humans, we have agency, like especially when when we're embedding AIs in our we think we have a lot of agencies, and like the future is dependent upon our collective actions and the choices we make, right? It's not just nothing is inevitable. And research has been consistently showing that none of those technological outcomes are inevitable. It's the human decisions and choices and actions we're making that's shaping the outcomes. So yeah, I think that's a really fundamental question we got to think about. Like, is this the future we want, or something else? Casper, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, no, I'm still thinking about but yeah, I'm still thinking about that. What I've been seeing is that, the game industry for sure is also in terms of the process thinking about how to embed AI appropriately and what are the places that AI can do the job and where, humans need to take the lead and take control over it. But I think we're currently exploring in what ways it should be used, and of course the technology is also rapidly developing, so we will make mistakes. I think some of the things that we're also seeing where people are being fired and rehired, this is all part of us figuring out, where do we draw the line? Where do we need humans? How do we, co-develop and co-create? Um, and that is it's a little frightening, of course, to see all this happening and all these transformations and rapid developments happening and the disruptions that is happening throughout the industry. So that remains all to be seen. But I think what is really exciting to me, at least on the positive side, is still thinking about, the possibilities that it enables for people who normally don't really have the possibilities and access to do certain, or create certain activities, be it games or something else.
I just dropped an article from actually from my field. I think that nicely touches on some of the fundamental questions we've raised in this discussion.
Mm.
Yeah, the agency, like whenever we shift the responsibility or refigure this, like how human and AI interact, there's also shifting of agency, machine agency versus human agency. I think it's a constant reconfiguration, constant loop. We gotta figure out like what works the best.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking it works the other way around too, right? Where basically, in terms of power structures is basically the 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 person underneath basically is able to also get access to a lot of data, a lot of aspects that they can use, and overwhelm basically the people that need to oversee it. Because like I notice in my daily practice that I don't feel like I am able and capable to manage all the things that people are producing. So it creates for all these strange sort of reconfigurations of how we manage and operate and work together.
Wow, how are we feeling about this? Oh, there's another question, I think.
Mm.
Okay, considering the problems with AI, how can games and their speculative worlds be used to identify the problems and identify solutions?
Yeah. I mean that was actually kind of the example that I just mentioned, right? Where we were sort of like speculating, not just building the technology, but
Yeah.
speculating how people would feel about that. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the experiment, we actually asked do you want the AI to continue, yes or no, or et cetera, et cetera. So we were kind of like testing out. And of course, like there are all kind of questions with regards to, whatever people say in an experimental context or even just in a game context, to what extent does that transfer to the real world? But you could certainly set up scenarios and spaces where you could speculate. And this goes back a long time. Actually, the whole notion of scenario planning, which comes from the company Shell, that started basically, I think in the 70s, where they were trying to predict an oil crisis, and they pretended that an oil crisis would happen, and then they were thinking about, okay, if that were to happen, how do you act on it? And there's a lot of other examples too. There's some augmented reality games. One that's also well known is the World, because we're talking about oil these days, so I'll stick to that topic. It's called the World Without Oil, where basically people who were participating needed to document and live their lives as if there was no oil. So they couldn't use their cars, they couldn't use XYZ, and they needed to document how they were living their lives. And the idea was that all that documentation would then be useful for preparing for a future where there was no oil, so that we would be prepared for that. So I certainly think that game simulations and other kind of environments can be very useful to think about the ways that we're interacting with AI. Of course, some processes are harder and some are easier to simulate in these environments, but certainly can be done.
All right, so we have 4 minutes left. I guess my final question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you do given all the AI that's going on?
Oh, wow.
Too much? Is it too much?
I do have a vision. I know it's gonna, I think a preferable future would be both more regulations and more freedom. I know it sounds like I'm asking for two conflicting things, and it's super difficult to do. But you said magic wand. So I think more freedom supported by regulations. So they will, because AI does cause a lot of issues, and job market disruption and all that we've been talking about. I think there should be more regulations around all of those issues, but at the same time, people, I think Casper touched upon a few of that too, like independent game developers or independent creative technologists. We should have more power to, say, create our own AI models, create our own language models, not necessarily that large, based on the kind of knowledge and data that we think would be helpful for our work, for expressing our ideas, and for different social issues that we might want to tackle. So more diversified models, and more regulations. So that's my hope.
Okay, yeah, so more regulation on the macro level, but more support for the grassroots creations or using of technology. Lovely. Casper.
Yeah, that would be good for the stock market too, because think that have all the power to make the stock market crash if anyway, different topic. I do think that is actually really a wonderful idea to aspire to. What I want to add to that is basically transparency, because I think eventually, if you want to put humans in the loop and you want to truly have human AI interaction, I think there needs to be transparency into what the AI is doing, and so that you can understand what the AI is doing. So we need to build a lot more frameworks to understand and communicate actually with AI. And that requires us to come up with frameworks of what that human AI interaction looks like. One of my students is working on a language about how to speak to large language models, for instance, so that you can better understand what you're asking, what the AI is providing, and how it's mapping the input and outputs. But I think there's a lot more work to be done around that, because I think we're all talking eventually around control, transparency, trust, and these are all kind of really important concepts that I think, and I would like with a magic wand to basically be able to get to that. But we also know that that's even very difficult between humans and humans. But I'd love to see more of that happen aside from what Carrie mentioned, because I think that's also critically important.
Yeah, that's lovely. And with that, I think we're concluding the panel discussion today.